Welcome everyone. It's really our big pleasure to welcome you and to see you. Well, not in person again, but many attendants today. So I think we'll even hit our record for famous, meanwhile famous breakfast. I would say it's, I think, the 9th or the 10th session we organize. And today will be about the eLN implementation at Roche DIA. We will hear in a couple of minutes much more about that. But before we go to that, I would like to say a few more words about wega, because I'm not sure that everyone in the meeting knows about wega. So the symbolic we usually use to represent what we do is that bridge, and this is really what it's all about. So it's building the bridge between the business and the informatics in the life science area. So this is really our expertise. We have people with double qualification that can really understand both part of that bridge. And this is really for us very important, because this is where many projects fail from our perspective, that people from the lab or from the business cannot really express themselves in a vocabulary that IT people can understand. And on the other side, IT people do not really understand what the business is really doing in the lab. And this is really majority of the work we do is doing this translation, sometimes it's really in the home language translation, but really transforming what the lab or the other people in the clinical area are doing into actionable item that a program can conduct in an usually digitalization project. And for doing this, we usually offer 360 services. On the top hand side, you can see more the business-oriented area where we are specialized into, which is lab and research. So today it's all about that. So the eLN we will hear about, it's R&D area. And here we have many people that support really very early already, from selection of the right software to do the digitalization with support for request for proposal, process analysis, and then of course helping the people during the implementation of the project. And the same support we offer also for the clinical development area, where we also support people when it comes to clinical studies and how to accelerate clinical studies, how to manage the data, how to analyze the data. And aspects like data science or digital biomarkers are really focus that we are working on right now in many projects. And that business view is usually accompanied by other two angles, which is the regulatory part, which I'm happy to represent also today. How to, when it's in life science area, very early you come with questions around quality, around regulations, and this is really important to also make this bridge between the business and the quality and the informatics. In that case, it's a triliteral bridge usually that we take responsibility for, and this is usually something that we do also very early when the project is started, to from the beginning plan how to do that. Especially right now, many projects also around what we will hear also a bit today about how to combine agility and validation, which is in some cases for some of the customers sounds paradoxical or sounds big challenges, and how to make sure that this is really possible to make those words work together. And last but not least, we also in many cases take over also some technical components in projects. When it comes, for example, in many projects, when it's about lab digitalization, issues arise very soon with how to connect, for example, your instruments, your chromatography system to your LIMS, for example, is a typical challenge. But not only that, all the lab instrument integration is a big topic. And for those that attend previous breakfast, we have been talking quite a lot about that, about standardization in the lab. You might have heard about SILA or data standardization like ANIML. And all of that requires as well some technical know-how to be able really to integrate all these components that you need to build that solid bridge at the end. So this is in a few words about wega. Well, today we have very interesting events, but we have quite a lot of upcoming events as well. Very soon, still a digital one, a virtual one, let me say. One of the topics I've been talking about will be about how to find your LIMS for your lab. It's something we do with many customers to find the most appropriate one, depending on on the situation in the lab. It could be very different. For example, if it's in a service lab or if it's a producing company, it might not be the best, the same software you would need to select at the end. And after that, we will be very happy because finally many events will take place again on site with real three-dimensional people, which we have been really missing the last 2 years, to be honest. Virtual breakfasts like this one are nice, but having real people in front of you is really better for connection, Q&A afterwards around the coffee machine. And very soon we have the Paperless Lab Academy, where we sponsored the event and have several workshops, for example, around user-centric lab digitalization. After that, we will also be at the Future Labs Live in Basel, which is an event that has been also taking place last couple of years. There it will be about a roundtable we will moderate around digital transformation in R&D. Well, more what are the promises, what is the reality, and what are the pain points. And I will have the honor in June to make, this one is an hybrid event, so half is on-site, half is remote, at the Pharma IT Compliance in Bonn, which I will also talk about agile and validation and what are the lessons learned from concrete projects we have been seeing, and how a framework we developed at Vega could help maybe to support this type of projects. The list is not holistic. For example, we also have Analytica end of June that will take place on site, but you can also find the list here with many more events. And we usually also publish on LinkedIn the upcoming events. So feel free to join us, and we would be happy to meet all of you in reality or in virtual events like that. Yeah, so for today, I hope you all had your real breakfast, because usually in the past before COVID, we have been distributing croissant and coffee when it was really an on-site event, plus people attending remotely. We did not find yet a lyophilization process to send it per Wi-Fi to all of you guys, so you should have your whole croissant and coffee already in you. What we can provide today is tasty brain food, and we will have now a very interesting topic where Frank will present a story about implementation of an eLN worldwide at Roche Diagnostics, and especially also some aspects on how to validate and to change from waterfall to Scrum in such an environment with SaaS solution globally. It's very tricky. And so just a small note, if you have questions, please post them on the chat or mark them. We will have enough time at the end for Q&A. Normally, we would have around 30 minutes for Q&A. So do not hesitate to put them on the chat. It's rather inconvenient for Frank to answer them on the fly, so we would like to collect them and take them at the end, and or mark them on your side and come back with the questions at the end. So, and now as few words from my side about Frank. So Frank has a PhD in organic chemistry, joined Roche DIA in Bensberg, so next to Munich, for those that do not know. In 2019, working in the development of critical raw materials for Roche Diagnostics. And in 2018, he took over the responsibility for that big project we'll talk about as product owner. So Scrum methodology, so a very central role for such a project. And yeah, now Frank, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank Christof. So I can just share and then you will see it, or how is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Share now, it should work.
Okay, let me check. So good morning also from my side. It's really a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk about our quite thrilling implementation. And like you just mentioned, Christof, so I'm actually coming from the business, and it was really for me some kind of a real personal development when I joined this project, because you need to consider I'm coming from the classical way of how it is still happening in chemistry. So you start studying, then you're doing your PhD, and then suddenly you end up somewhere in industry, leading a team, and you need to continue like you started working in university. So, and that's the classical kind of career, and typically you stay also in that environment, and do not really step out a lot. Yeah, and that's for that reason, for me, it was really a big opportunity to join this project with such an impact. And I will try to explain why we've been doing the things like we've done it, and also what kind of ideas and knowledges we gain throughout the whole process. So and the good thing is, now that we have 2022, the official kind of project phase will end soon, and we already reached a point where somehow in an operative or purely operative mode, where we're talking about further developments, but eLN is considered just as one part and one piece in the whole digital landscape. Yeah, so that's what I want to share with you, just to give you a brief overview what I will talk about. So especially, I think that is it's worth to understand the challenges and why we've done the things like we've done it, based on how the environment within Roche. So what are we talking about when we're talking about Roche Diagnostics? So the landscape, the challenges, specifically the project scope, and then also how we initiated the whole project. I mean, that's somehow how we started, and we completely changed it throughout the whole process. And then we had some kind of, it was not really a cut, but even though I call it a cut, so that was some time when we were rethinking a lot of things and early decisions we made. And that was basically when we needed to look for a solution, for an eLN solution, and also shifted to a Scrum-based implementation. And then also what is of importance is how we then could run a SaaS application in a validated fashion. So that's also something I would like to describe, and finally closing and giving some kind of outlook where we are moving on from now. Okay. So first of all, where are we coming from? And this is somehow a bit complicated, because when we started, the R&D world in DIA looked a bit different, because we now have passed through a transformation. So at that time, I belonged to one entity that is called Centralized and Point of Care Solutions, one business area, with about let's say approximately 2,000 people, and mostly located in Penzberg and Mannheim, and also some pieces in Switzerland and Rotkreuz. So at that time, we were focusing, and I will show that on the next slide, on IVD tests, and most of the things we were doing in that entity, I'm not talking about the whole Roche DIA team, we are doing classical paper. Yeah, so there used to be the classical lab notebooks that the chemists of you will know quite well. So still people were writing all the things manually, cutting out pictures, pasting them in, doing those kind of workflows, like I call it print, sign, scan, share. So that was something I used to do quite often. So you're editing something in Excel or Word, then you print it out, then you scan it, then you sign it because you need the signature for quality reasons, and then you scan it again and distribute it via email. Yeah, that was a typical kind of situation where we used to be in. And also looking into the other areas, we somehow were late with regards to electronic documentation. So, but this is maybe one extreme example. there were other areas that were more advanced and being completely already on Excel or Word and storing it somewhere. But somehow, and that's, I guess most of you know that or have experience there, searching is really cumbersome, and that was one factor where we also had some recommendations out of an internal audit, that it took quite long to get the material, the documents, relevant documents, to the inspector. And so then we wanted to therefore, of course, reduce this burden by reducing the cost, provide custom search features, by storage, also with the idea to go into an archive. So how can we maintain our experiments and all our knowledge, and also thinking about collaboration and transparency. I mean, if you have everything on paper or somewhere on a local drive, you cannot really share experiments. And it happened quite often, even in my direct environment, that two people were doing exactly the same kind of experiment, and that's really very, very time consuming and quite costly if you think of such a big organization. In the end, coming also from a quality relevant perspective, one of the intention was also to identify a smooth review and signature workflow for experiments. Also, to give you one example, so in some areas when people are doing troubleshooting, they are generating some kind of batch record, like you have it in the production environment, and then typically those folks, all the information is stored in one binder, and then typically the folks were running around trying to find a manager who can sign off. So in case of an absence, this was also quite cumbersome. So in the end, and I mean in the end, the people we have employed in the lab, most of them, they are not really loving documentation. So they love to do the lab work, and therefore the principal idea was to somehow generate them more time for do their valuable work they are typically doing in the lab. Good. So like I said, this is a brief overview about Roche Diagnostics if you haven't had an idea before. So we are, let's say, our big brother is the pharma organization, but we also we are contributing quite significantly to the diagnostics market as the market leader. And in principle, we have 4 different customer areas, which is the core lab on the one side. So this is any kind of immunological testing or coagulation. So whenever, for example, due to Corona, that's an easy one, because you can directly give the example when you're going when you're in an official test, immunogen testing to Corona. This might happen also on a Roche machine, like it is displayed here. The second customer area is the molecular lab. I also don't need to mention a lot about it. We also have those PCR tests, which are also running in such a machine. Then we have the pathology lab, so everything around tissue, predominantly connected to oncology questions, and finally point of care. So one application, again coming from Corona, those test strips that we have in place. Yeah. So those customer areas we have also represented in R&D. So they are strongly focusing on test development, system integration, partially automation, troubleshooting, and these kind of questions. And why do I'm saying this? This is all late stage development. So it has it's typically in the GXP environment. And then last but not least, I need to mention we have 2 entities. One is where my home base is. It's in reagents. Of course, all those technologies are based on specific reagents that are somehow coming from chemistry, biology, and also in combination with analytical tools to specify whatever's coming out. Yeah, and of course, early concepts for any kind of test is coming from the research and early development organization. So those two entities, they are pretty much distributed along the whole landscape of early research to late development. In addition, we are not isolated in diagnostic R&D, but we have also collaboration partners, internal collaboration partners. For example, diabetes care is somehow handled separately, and we have also collaboration with our big brother pharma, as well as operations, because somebody needs to produce finally the things that are coming out of our shop. So that's why am I saying this? Because like it is here, we have a quite complex and heterogeneous technology landscape from early research to late development. And so the idea was to have one eLN solution where we can capture all of those activities. You could say, okay, that's maybe not a big thing, but if you also look on another level, which is actually the global distribution, you can see we have people present in Central Europe, like I said, in China, in South Africa, and also in the United States. And when we initiated the project, we actually came out with a rough estimate. At first, let's say 1,500 users, and now, as we know, we have a lot more than 2,000 potential eLN users across the globe, which is based on I don't know if you have a lot of contact to electronic lab notebooks, but in principle, they are made for any kind of the wet lab kind of work, so chemistry, biology, but also test development and comparable kind of things. Yeah. So that's also another sphere of complexity, and I wanted to mention it because it has an impact on how you can process such a project. So in the end, we came up with these key goals, like I mentioned before. We wanted to provide access and basic configuration for all users on all sites on the same instance, and that was maybe something that just developed through the project, because in the beginning we were not talking about a SaaS application, to be honest. In the beginning, we were really thinking of having it on-prem because we need to be the owner of our data. This somehow also changed, and we came up finally with the practical solution to have everything on one instance, and this needed to be a SaaS application. Like I said, we wanted to document all lab processes, and with the idea to become completely paperless. Like I said, this was one of the first non-negotiable requirements. This system needed to be validated, yeah, because we are doing all the late stage development in the GXP environment. Of course, eLN cannot be alone and isolated. You need to bring data in from different sources, so important integrations that we wanted to realize. And last but not least, and that's also a very, very important point, if you're thinking about people that are still on classical lab notebooks, for them it's really a big change to an electronic system. So we wanted to provide a smooth transition for all lab scientists and technicians to the electronic lab notebook. Yeah, and this is somehow where we're coming from and where we wanted to end up. So just a list of things. Yeah, primarily manual documentation is where we started, and reporting, local drive storage. I mentioned most of those before. Local standards. This is also maybe a very, very interesting field. If you're on the same instance, you can think of generating standards for the different teams, because you have the ability to share templates and so on. Cumbersome linking to reference systems, paper-based signature processes, paper archiving, and that's where we wanted to go to. Electronic documentation, central cloud-based storage, aligned standards, dynamic linking across systems, which is also with regards to integrations, of course, an electronic signature process, and like I also mentioned before, to have the ability to connect to a long-term storage of all the information. Good, and that was somehow, this is somehow the scheme of how we proceeded in the whole journey. So we started sometime in 2018, and like I said, when I started, it was the first thing my mentor out of the organization was, oh Frank, this is really an interesting one. We haven't done something like this before, yeah, because this really required that you bring all the teams together, and typically there are some connections and interfaces coming through projects, but it's not this kind of, now I have the team of 1,500 people and they are all contributing to the same kind of project and have the same kind of participation to it. Yeah. Like I said, we have this complex environment. So at first we did spend some time on analyzing what the people are actually doing and where's the need with regards to documentation and their overall lab processes, and we then moved over to a sandbox kind of experience. I will refer to it why we've done that, because that was also a very important step in the whole process. Then what I already called the cut, then happened something that we were not expecting, and that made us switch to Scrum and Scrum team and solution selection. And then finally in the last phase was actually the implementation of what we call platform, and finally rolling it out and distributing it in the teams. Good. So how did we start? Yeah. So the typical situation is, and I think that's in most of the bigger companies still the case, people are trained to run waterfall projects. And where's this coming from? I was asking myself, and I was thinking the same kind of thing. Yeah? You need to make a plan. You need to set up an org chart. You need to define roles and responsibilities. But in the end, it's quite obvious where this is coming from, because already in university we are used to learn that we need to define goals and work stepwise. We need to look for funding and these kind of things. So that makes us going in the direction of, okay, before we're starting, we're making a plan. And typically the plans are looking, and those were our plans. We started with PMM. So with the milestones accordingly, and then we did set up something like this, some Gantt chart type of project plan with different go live sessions, and that was something we presented also to our main stakeholders, and it's somehow in the beginning it was needed, because we needed to look for funding and convince also the people, and then it's easy to say, okay, I will deliver it by this time, without really knowing what you will deliver. But this gives you a good basis to ask for funding, and that's also what we've been doing. We considered, of course, we needed to consider the business case, which is again some kind of challenge, because typically, if there's one project coming up to R&D, let's say a new immunological test, yeah, you can quite precisely calculate how much this will cost, how long this will last, how long this will take you, and in the end, you can also estimate quite precisely how much time, so how many years it will take until you have refunded this investment. So for the eLN case, this is impossible in the end. Yeah, of course we did bring up this kind of value, so we are saving, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 million per year, but this is, everything is just virtually. Yeah, you don't, it's not measurable in the end, and nobody in the end will get the money back out of it. So it's somewhere distributed over all the throughout the whole organization, and distributed through all the processes and work the people are doing. At that time, we were in a quite lucky situation, we thought, at least, because we did some kind of pre-selection, because the colleagues in pharma, they were already employing an eLN for quite some time. And so we were totally focusing just on this vendor and the solution. This was an on-premise solution, like I said, so SaaS was no option at that time. But this somehow changed throughout the process. Yeah, what helped us a lot, I mean, that's worth to mention. We were early on taking care of all the main stakeholders we had in place, and I think that was really a very important point. I mean, especially when it comes to such projects, it's often not really the basis. So we had a lot of commitments. So many people were also already asking also for some kind of eLN solution. And the top management, like I said here, we have full commitment by the leadership team. However, the biggest challenge is somewhere in the middle. Yeah. So so you need to also involve middle management, and therefore it was really crucial to identify who is with us and who is maybe not convinced that this overall project is a good thing to do. And especially in the early phase, we already started going into dialogue with them, understanding their concerns and trying to convince them that we are doing something meaningful for their people. That's a really important one, growing together as one team. And I really can emphasize what Christof said in the introduction. When we started, there was a big gap between what we wanted to have out of business and what IT thought we would like to have, or what is needed. And we had intense interaction, a lot of workshops, and we took the time, and it was worth to go that route, because we learned step by step what is really needed from a business perspective. And so every time we saw that it's going apart, this was obviously before Corona, we sat together in one room for one day, and we were able to solve most of the issues we had. So that's I think also a very important step in the whole organization of the project. Last but not least, and I will refer to this on one of the next slides, it was so helpful to clearly define the scope of the project, because especially, as you can imagine, people are coming up with ideas and saying, this is a must, I must have this. If this solution doesn't provide this and that, I cannot work with it. So we were coming up with hundreds of different user requirements, and it is really important that in the beginning you clearly define what is in scope, but furthermore what is out of scope, and to clearly communicate about it. And that's what we've done quite early in the process. Yeah, then like listed, so one we needed to look, okay, what is the common ground for such a solution, especially when it comes to global kind of solution. So we intensively in the beginning, I was not really convinced that this is worth, but in the end, I must say this is something we could always go back and we are now sharing it with other project teams, and this is quite helpful and valuable. So we spend a lot of time, like you can see here. We had 6 workshops, 1-day workshops, a lot of participants, and we were actually focusing on what are the people doing, and what do they document at which stage. And in the end, we came up with such a general scheme of 25 different high-level process steps throughout the whole organization, and that made us confident to say, okay, let's just go with one solution. We will be able to capture all kind of experimental processes that are executed in the lab. Yeah, and that's what I already mentioned. As a side notice, yeah, that was great to come out with this one, and we were capturing a lot of user requirements. I think we ended up with somewhere in the range around 500 user requirements, and I don't need to tell you, but there's no solution out on the market that typically fulfills all of them. Yeah, so we somehow needed to bring some kind of structure into that, and being able to do some kind of prioritization within the user requirements. So what is really important? What are the non-negotiables? And in order to identify those, I'm not talking about the quality relevant ones. So they were clearly defined. There was no discussion, but especially for like I already said, these kind of things, when people are saying, if I do not have this and that, I'm not able to work with the solution. And that was a point. Like I said, we already had a pre-selected solution, and we did set up a sandbox with it. And this was really a very, very important step. So we involved most of the folks that were already contributing in the workshops, and they had some time in organized sessions to experience how such a system could work. And the good thing was, most of the people came out and said, oh, I like that. When can I have it? So the good thing about it was all of the requirements, they were mostly not so important anymore, because it's really a change in how you are documenting. Those user requirements were coming from the perspective how they are doing it now, and not how they will do it in the future. And that was the point to say, yes, so after the sandbox, we will go into the direction and file a contract together with this vendor, so that we can start implementation. And that's then this situation came. So the negotiations were very, very difficult, and we were really surprised about some kind of behavioral aspects in it. So we reached out to our steering committee, which is in principle was the leadership team in the business area, and we did make the tough decision, even though we had spent a lot of time on how to think about how we can already configure the solution to the needs of the specific departments. We made the decision, okay, it doesn't really make sense. Let's take another round and go into looking for alternatives. And I think that's a very important one. During my product owner course that I then finally took, this plot appeared also on somewhere in the, and I don't know if you know that, but this is one of the most important things you need to be aware when you're starting a project. Typically, you're starting making one of the main decisions at a point where you do not have a lot of knowledge, and this is actually what happened to us. Yeah? So we initially decided to take this solution without really knowing what how it is working and how the whole partnership could work. Another decision in the early days was to remain on-prem and not being openly. Yeah, so we fixed that quite early, and this somehow changed when we came into this situation. Yeah, and what we also saw is, based on the number of user requirements, that it's not a good idea to continue in a waterfall kind of manner, to really think of stepwise release, planning for integrations here, and then onboarding those teams. So that was the other kind of thing that came to our mind and became obvious in that phase. So first, I want to refer on the solution selection, and then I will come over to how we switch to agile methodology. Yeah, so in the end, we took for the solution selection a 3-step process. We started with paperwork. There are some review articles. I guess that they will be already outdated because there are a lot of developments on the market currently. So this is just like we figured it out now. So the situation, like we figured it out, the situation now might be different from what you've seen here. So we had 88 solutions we considered. We did some paperwork, basically also on supporting model. Is the solution able? Can we get a validated system, and these kind of things? And we finally came up with those 7 solutions, and we had demos by them, and then followed by hands-on from selected 3 candidates. And in the end, we came out with a Signals notebook from PerkinElmer, and that's the solution we also implemented right now. Yeah. I think the most important factor here was that hands-on experience by our already trained people. Yeah, they said, "Okay, I like it," or "This is not possible," and this had the main part in the overall decision for Signals notebook, because it appeared to be quite intuitive, and apart from this, of course, all the IT criteria like basic requirements that needed to be fulfilled. There was some kind of solution architecture health check, regulatory compliance, and yeah, also the support looked quite good. In the end, there was also something said. It was actually Signals notebook was just launched, I think, in 2017 or 18. To a small team. They were not really promoting it, so we were one of the first ones that made the decision to go with Signals notebook. That was another aspect. We really thought of, okay, this is now, and it was a new tool. So most of the solutions we figured out was, of course, most of the vendors also provided a SaaS application, but this was mostly based on their on-prem solution. And PerkinElmer was really the first ones completely from scratch building up a SaaS solution. And so also from a technology perspective, that made us confident that we will have the opportunity to work with it for quite some time. Yeah? Came up then in the global context, how can we collaborate, and of course also a cost estimation. So that also played a role. Support, internal support amount and overall costs. Yeah. Good. And then the other part was, we've been in waterfall, so how do we get into a Scrum kind of mode? So we are we were segregating the different kind of aspects what we want to do. So one of the early ideas was already, okay, let's come out with a basic kind of solution, yeah, which we called platform at that time. So this would be a system that is validated already with the main parameters, but probably not with any user. Then we had a second phase that was called global increment, thinking about main attributes and settings that would need to work for all the users in the instance. And then we wanted to come out starting small with one pilot group, and that was the overall concept. And then we thought, hey, yeah, let's go into a Scrum kind of working within those different increments. And I mean, just by calling it increment, it becomes clear. So it made absolutely sense. And also, if you think further down, after this piloting, we are just adding the next teams, and this could probably also happen in some kind of sprint-wise fashion. And so then that it was so clear. Okay, let's try it out with Scrum. Why not? Yeah. What we've seen initially is really the main challenges we need to overcome was shifting the perspective, and just thinking about that we have a lot of technical people in the lab. Yeah. They are trained to think in requirements, and that was one of the main challenges to talk now about to talk about needs, yeah, and thinking in what kind of value does it bring. Also, what is also difficult, people are not really trained in teamwork. So if you think of really sharing burden of some things, yeah, working together as a team, especially from chemistry, all the chemists know what I'm talking about. Typically, you have a 10-step synthesis, and you start at the beginning and you end at the end. But why not just distributing different steps in this whole process? And that's something that is, from my perspective, critical to get it run. Yeah. And yeah, like it is said here, agile methodology often collides with typical mindset of production-driven companies. Yeah, we are all trained to do, instead of thinking about if we are doing it, if the process how we are doing it is good or bad. So that was also one thing. And when we're talking about stakeholders, that was also, I can tell you, I've been in some quite interesting and intense discussions where it became obvious that some folks are just disturbed by calling something agile. Yeah, that was also something that we experienced when we switched to this. Good. In principle, about Scrum methodology and so on, I don't need to tell a lot, but then still we were in this kind of lost situation, having hundreds of requirements. How can we get it done? So out of the sandbox, we identified real end user needs. So what is important, and then we took some method that is quite known in the agile space, which is story mapping. So I guess all of you know those quite good examples from Starbucks and others where they have done a whole story. So typically what you're doing is you're describing a process, and underneath you're sorting different items that are relevant, and doing some kind of prioritization. As you can see here, this is one of the buildings in Pennsburg with a nice view in the interior, and we just put the stickers on the window. That was a lot of fun, and in addition, we came out with something quite valuable, because in the end, the idea here is, once you have the process flow, like here, and you have sorted those items, every item is translated into a user story and finally ends up in the product backlog, which is then basis for the implementation. So, and that's from our first story map. This is just some kind of view. It was really a big thing, and we distributed it, like I said, into a platform and global increment in order to identify predominantly validation relevant items. And here, I don't know if you can see it, we have here some kind of ERES something, yeah. So ERES stands for electronic record, electronic signature. So everything that is somehow quality and validation relevant. And then we had another part on the whole story map where we defined the global settings, and those were this was the first basis for our product backlog, and we could directly go into prioritization and walking over those items every now and then. We clearly identified the typical observations. Some of the cards are not really moving and nobody's taking care, so it's maybe not relevant at the moment, so we kicked it out and moved up and concentrated on the most important things. Good, yeah. To translate those into user stories, this is just a sketch out of Trello. Now our user stories look a bit different, but the principle is described here, yeah. So you have the user story itself. As a user, I want to so describing the need and the value. But we also added some kind of acceptance criteria that was already thinking into a validation system to define test cases and also the test trigger level. Yeah, test trigger level described for us if we would need to have just a demo. So there was estimated out of the risk what kind of test would need to be set up, scripted testing, or if demos is sufficient, and so on. What is also included in these user stories is a quality check, and like I said, impact and risk assessment. When in the beginning we started with a classical functional risk assessment, but this is not really specific to the concrete items in most of the cases, because you're coming out with some kind of general estimate, and we at that point realized that it makes more sense to directly connect this to the user stories. Yeah, and that was actually a very important concept to run the validation just out of the user stories, and this overall in combination in capturing the backlog and the user stories in a validated system which is called Retina. Yeah, you will find it on some of the slides, which is basically Codebeamer as the tool. So and here you have the ability to come from the user story to have a direct connection to your testing. That was actually the most important point why we were going into that system. Good. Then how does the validation process look like? I mean, you need to keep in mind that so for the initial setup, we already have done this. So based on the user stories, doing testing, quality checks, and so on, we are purely documenting it in the system. But of course, the story goes on, because every new feature, every new thing that we're implementing walks through this process of, in principle, testing and checking if there's validation relevance. And this becomes relevant when you think about that PerkinElmer has 3 platform releases per year. And so far we've been lucky, because most of the things we assess to be not to be major, to have a major impact on our running system. But in the end, that's something that we are checking, and where we need to walk through the whole process of putting it into the sprint, making the risk assessment, quality check, and then confirm it, test it, accept it, and release it. And that's what we are doing constantly. We have then a connection between what is coming from PerkinElmer, but what are we releasing to the productive system. And we are talking about up to 7 business releases where we are providing new features for the people, because in some cases it's really really easy, because you have checkboxes where you can say, okay, this is going to be usable on the productive system or not. So that gives us some kind of flexibility to decide whether we bring it to the or not. And in some cases, it's really about do we have specific use cases? Not every new feature that is released by PerkinElmer is relevant for our people.
Frank, just quickly the time check. So we are nearing the planned time, but I think we have still some buffer. So you can just continue 5 or 10 minutes. We should be okay.
I'm almost at the end, to be honest. So I think I just have 2 or 3 slides. Okay, so in the end, what I also want to mention, because that was also one very important step, is when we're talking about thousands of users, it's a big effort to think about how can we get this, how can we bring that to the people, and here I would say we also were lucky with regards to two aspects. On the one hand, due to the fact that this Signals notebook is so intuitive, we came so the overall training effort was quite low. So we just half a day as end user trainings. Of course, we were focusing on train the trainer. So basic trainings provided by PerkinElmer to power users, and power users were training then our people. We had, though, still the focus on hands-on, and because this is really a critical and crucial factor for user adoption. In addition to those trainings, we were providing together with PerkinElmer also video pills, release notes that are where we share new features on the system. In the end, and I think that was something where we were not so certain about if this is going to work, but we were lucky in the lucky situation that all of our power users, most of them were really highly engaged or highly engaged and bringing up, organizing all the trainings on their own, bringing up ideas. I would say at the moment we are somewhere in the range of 150 power users across the whole organization, and this is really due to their engagement that we could roll out in this time of, let's say, a bit more than 1 year to the broad community. Good. So I'm coming to the end. So how does this job continue? We now have about 2,500 users on the productive instance, and like I said initially, it's not eLN itself. It's maybe a very central tool and of high importance, but now we are already on the way, thinking further down the road what is really important for the people in the lab, and of course connection of all the different tools, and seeing eLN as one integrated piece in the whole digital landscape. So we are also going like the whole world in the direction of digital lab, and this absolutely makes sense. We already have some kind of joint PI planning, because in all of those discussions around APIs and interfaces and connections, it in some cases is not really an eLN item, even though a lot of the eLN users would benefit from it, and that's the way we are going to. Okay, last but not least, I would like to thank the whole team, and I again want to mention that we have a joint team out of business. So it's not just me as a product owner, but of course we have a lot of different experts from the different entities, which you can see we are talking about 20-25 people overall. And on the other hand, we have contribution from the DIA IT, and this is really a great collaboration, and I have to emphasize this was really crucial for getting this project running. And if you hear people saying, "Oh, this is really a great tool," and people telling after the trainings, "This was the best software training I ever had," those kind of things. This shows us that we've done a lot of things quite right. Yeah? Additionally, I need to mention all of our sponsors, because without funding and constant commitment from the teams, we wouldn't have been able to run this project. And last but not least, also the colleagues from PerkinElmer. We experienced them to be quite collaborative, and we also grew together as one team with regards to those colleagues. Yeah, and last but not least, I would like to thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Frank. It was really interesting. I will start with some of the questions that we have in the chat. So I'm starting from the bottom. So did you create direct connection with instruments like balances, etc., and did you implement links with other software from your organization?
What was the question? I didn't get.
If you create direct connection with instruments like balances or others from the eLN, or if it.
Yeah. So initially that was the idea, but now, like I said, we now have this concept of having a data lake, data river, and so the idea would be to have scales somehow integrated or connected to this, and the eLN on the other side can directly get the data from there. Yeah. Scales is an interesting example, I would say, from my perspective, because it's simple and not so fancy. So most of the IT folks say, "Oh, it's not really an API. It's just capturing some values." But for the folks in the lab, it's quite important. Yeah. And I know from other colleagues in operations in Mannheim, it took them half a year to generate some kind of connection to scales. I know that PerkinElmer is also providing a solution, and we are currently evaluating if this is a way for us. But in principle, we will go in the direction of having it centralized an interface on the data river, data lake. Can you see me actually, or do I need to do something?
Yeah, we can see you. We can see you. Okay. Any question from the audience? I saw Roy, you raised your hand.
Yeah, good morning. This is Roy from Böhringen Ingelheim. We are at the moment in the same discussions, but a question, sorry, I was a little late. Why do you focus only of eLN? We evaluate at the moment LIMS with an electronic platform to build up an end-to-end process and we started also with a Scrum process and with a design thinking workshop to evaluate what the business need, and our business need an end-to-end process, one under a system under one roof without a hybrid login and anything else, and on the GXP way with an rooted way with science to say, okay, do you have closed or finalized this step, go to the next, or for the non-GXP, for the early stage people with an more or less free thinking of a possibility to document on a freeway. And for me, it's really interesting that you go really direct to an eLN and not to an ELP, electronic platform, or LIMS with eLN or this way.
Yeah,
what was the base for the decision to go really? And we have as a standard platform IDBS, and for me it's really a nightmare to build up all the processes on an IDBS platform. It's not possible to build up an end-to-end process, and that's really interesting that Roche go this way to an eLN.
Yeah, so I mean the first question is, the pain was the highest for documentation, and
yeah,
that's what the people were looking for. But I'm just I can only speak for the situation how it was in my direct environment. Of course, we also have LIMS systems being running in the Roche world, yeah. And that's what I said at the end. So we will bring those kind of things together, what in that way, what we call the digital lab, and there will be some centralized entry. That's what is currently developed. So you have some sort of landing page that leads you to those different tools, and eLN will be one of those. Yeah, and like I also said, I mean, we've been looking at different solutions, like I said, yeah, and Sapio, for example. There would have been also the opportunity to have a LIMS system and an eLN, but there were other criteria that led us to decide to go with PerkinElmer. PerkinElmer itself will also provide some kind of LIMS functionality. Yeah, but let's say it might take some time until we can really think about. So it's really a question of where do you start. So it's not about getting all done within the time frame. So the focus was really on the eLN at the moment. But I can say we have a lot of other systems and initiatives in parallel to eLN. Yeah.
Okay, many thanks. It was a great presentation. Many thanks for that.
Good, thank you.
Next question was from Thomas Eichmann. Would you like to say it live? Are you still here, Thomas?
Yes, I'm here. So I'm just my question was just I'm a little bit. I was wondering, how did you convince your management or your QA to go for Scrum instead of using waterfall or V model in the GMP environment? So I think, or that was not so easy. So I'm just interested in how did you have done that, because that would be a help for a lot of us too.
I would say we are already in some kind of transition phase, and especially I can just speak for the folks in Penzberg and the development environment there. It was always said, we are agile in R&D, and we are not because as scientists you are used to work agile without really knowing what agility means. So they were claiming, okay, yeah, we are doing experiments, we fail, and then we take the next step. But I guess we all know that agility is something else, and so there have been at that time some kind of discussions around if the organization overall is agile and how we can get them become more agile, and so that helped us quite a lot in the situation. Yeah, so like you said, this was a lot of discussion, and we found out that some folks were said, yeah, whatever is needed, just do it. So with the commitment and trust in the team that we're doing the right thing, and others were really asking, oh, you're doing a 2 days workshop. I want to know what you need to show me how this resulted in some more efficient outcomes. Yeah, so with regards to speed and functionality. So we had the whole landscape. Some people coming from device development, so they used to already work in Scrum or Safe. And so that helped us also a lot. So we had let's say a mixed constellation in our leadership team, and it was a lot of effort to go into those discussions. And in the end, what also helped us was we had representatives of all of those teams in our team, and they had full commitment by the leaders. And in the end, it was some kind of dialogue we had where those leaders could also ask the experts. They said who are in charge of the overall project. But it was really difficult in some cases, I can tell you.
Okay, thanks.
But talking, and acting and showing, okay, we are able to deliver. But I mean, the main challenge here is, I don't know, it took us 3 months to get it run properly and to really feel now we are in the flow and coming out with the stuff more efficient. And you need to overcome this kind of time, but you need to take the time to get it set up. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Ralf also had several questions in the chat. Maybe you want to...
Okay. Yeah, we at Abbott, we have this, what we at the moment very keen topic is CSA, so computer system assurance. We want to move away from the classical CSV, like user requirements, testing, FOA, and so on. So the thinking behind that is critical thinking on computer system validation is one stuff, and to use as much as possible vendor documentation. So as you have a SaaS system, so to what extent did you also took in consideration to use a lot of vendor documentation, and did you do it as well in the functional risk assessment?
Yeah, that was clearly the basis. In the end, our policy at least requires that we are repeating some things at least on normal basis. But in the end, of course, we were using that. Yeah, especially when it comes to all the CFR Part 11 kind of considerations, GDPR, and these kind of things. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, that was needed to be provided by the vendor itself, and also with regards to now that it's a cloud solution, you need to be secure that everything behind it, where your data lies and so on, is you do not have an insight on this. Of course, we were relying on the vendor documentation completely.
Okay. Thanks.
Good. Thank you.
But of course, testing and so on, you need to do. Yeah. There's no way to overcome that.
Yeah. Did you do automated testing? I mean.
We are working on this.
Okay.
I think from my experience, this is also the same in every company right now. They are working on that. But especially for some SaaS solution, it might be really worth investigating that. But here you said about 3 releases per year, which is not yet too much, right? Some other vendors are really even more providing new features, and there it could make sense to also think about some automatization, right? Or also regression testing part. Or...
Yeah, I mean, especially when we're talking about just purely bug fixes or something like this, then of course I can think of having more releases per year. Yeah, but at the moment I would say they have big packages of new features, so they are still in a ramp up phase in setting up their software properly. Yeah. So then I would say we are lucky that it's just happening 3 times per year.
But it was still not yet really defined. You said PerkinElmer was at the beginning on that journey, right? So have you been able to impact a little bit how they do their deployment? As a Roche, usually you have certain power that maybe small company do not really have.
That was in the beginning. That was also helpful that we could bring up, and we still can bring up ideas. But as you can imagine, I mean, they are not Roche, so they need to focus on all of their customers. So it's some kind of we are also setting up, and that might be also a very good thing. I experienced it also with IDBS, because it was mentioned, there's an independent user group, so exchange with other companies in order to identify what are the global needs of all the users on such a system. And so, but we are still in processing to set up some kind of community of practice within the pharmaceutical chemical industry. Yeah. So that's not in place. And then, of course, as a team, you can have this kind of telling. If all the customers are coming to such a vendor, you can say, okay, we identified this is the need of everyone. Yeah.
Daniel, do you want to react? I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, no, I just wanted, I'm not sure I got the point about the validation, because you're running under E3, correct? Whereby you get a release every 3 months and an early access, and you have 1 month to validate. So how do you manage that to be, I mean, to reduce the amount of work? Well, typically what I would see would be to do a risk-based analysis on release notes to see what's the likely impact, and then
that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Okay.
And like I said, so far there haven't been changes that we would consider as major, where we really needed to do a revalidation of more than just the item itself. Yeah. And that's what we're doing every time, just before the release, having a look on what are the new features, what is the impact on the validation status, what is the impact on business, on the end user side, what is the impact on admin side, and these kind of aspects. So that's what we are doing. Yeah.
Plus maybe ready to execute a couple of happy flow and regression tests, or not even?
Yeah, in some cases, but I'm not the expert in that, but this is considered, of course, to do regression tests. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then there was one last in the chat still, Willie or Will? Willie. Are you still here? Willie? Okay.
Yes. Okay. Here I am. Yes.
Okay.
One of the questions was, where's the link into your quality management system?
That's provided via Retina. So that's but as Retina is completely hosted by the IT, so the link is there. Yeah. So we have. Yeah, there's the connection.
Okay. The other thing was you used the word waterfall.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting, because what I understand by waterfall, that's what we used to do for mainframe programming at the very beginning, and had nothing to do with what you describe as a waterfall here. What you describe as a waterfall is the Microsoft way of doing a project.
Okay.
And not the waterfall, but it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
just to clear that up there, because the waterfall we did is, especially if you don't have all the requirements from all your clients, then you start up with a project one step at a time. So you use the first waterfall, and when that's finished, you learn from that, and then you make the next waterfall all the way down. And other things are interesting. You wanted to get away from requirements, but I think the very basic of everything is the requirements. And the requirements is not just from your clients, external clients, but also from your internal clients. What I really liked at your presentation was that you actually involved the involved right from the beginning. You can't do a project if you don't involve all those people who will be involved or already involved in that change. But one question was coming up here is how did you start the whole thing? I mean, the whole thing is a change, and a change always starts with a change request. So did you fill in a change request? Okay, good.
Not really. I mean, that was also some discussion in the beginning, and luckily from business quality side, we had some a lot of openness, I would say. So we pretty early checked what does our documentation guidelines tell us, and does electronic documentation fit in that? And that was actually the point where all the quality folks from business side said, as long as you're following the documentation guidelines, we are fine. Yeah.
That's not right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's yeah.
Therefore, we didn't really consider to have an official kind of change. Yeah.
But it is an official kind of change. I mean, you're working in an organization, okay? Roche is an organization, and so you have to work organized. And working organized means if a change comes up, you first write the request for it. Because the moment you do write the request, you give the chance to everybody involved, further along involved on the path, to have a say in it. You did that automatically now, following this path you did. You call it Scrum or whatever you call it, I don't mind. But what you really did is first get together all the requirements from the frame they are in and from all the people involved. And when you put that down, then afterwards you started up with the electronic parts or the technical parts, which I think is really great. And that's why you came out very well. Very well done, that work. Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on waterfall. I think we've done that, because the initial, and that might not become clear. So the initial idea was really to go with one release, and then we package everything in, and then at one time, yeah, that's what, like the waterfall describes it. We have the validated system, we release it to everyone. Yeah, that was the principal idea, and that's somehow what we changed.
Yeah, I know, but
right?
Yeah, but that's not the waterfall. What you mean is you actually done the whole project to the end, to the first end, then you get on. Yeah. But the waterfall in program is that you program one part, discuss it with the people, see if they can use it, and then you go further. But what I see very often, which gets my, creates my white hair, is that now people come from somewhere or other. No change request, nothing like it, just come and have a change. And then, of course, the whole thing goes down because you don't involve all the specialists. I mean, like you said, everybody in the lab is a specialist, and everybody in the lab needs then to do this. The other thing just comes to mind now when you said about the new versions of this software. I would have made a contract with this company that you don't have any new versions unless you ask for them, okay? Because this is, I mean, why should they send you new versions every week or 2 weeks? You bought that software from them as a platform for you, your processes and your requirements from all the people working with it. And now you want to keep it like this for 5 years at least before they make a change. And then they make a change according to your requirements.
Yeah,
okay. Let me quickly, I mean, just in the interest of time, that's my unpleasant job here. So we have 4 minutes left. Maybe there is time for one more question, then some closing words. Christof, what do you think?
Yeah, just one comment on that. I mean, this is the principle of SaaS. You can't always decide how much you get some releases. You don't have always the choice. This depends a little bit on your power against the vendor here, but that's just.
I can promise you, we tried it.
Yes,
we were not successful with regards to having an impact on when they release.
Yeah. Any last question from the audience? Doesn't seem to be the case. Okay. So then, yeah, last few words from my side. Many thanks, Frank. Was really interesting. Very long journey, and maybe last comment or question from my side on that. Do you regret also to have gone this way with more agility, and especially for such a big complex project, it is really for me a good strategy to cut the elephant into smaller pieces, right? For some small projects, it really doesn't make sense, and I see a tendency right now in hype, everything should be done agile, even if it's not necessarily applicable to one project where you know what you want to do. But here it was not clear from the beginning, and as you said, many different requirements. So, any regret, or was that from your perspective?
It was the right way. I learned a lot, and like I said, I'm not. The project is almost over, so my contribution to the whole environment will be limited at the time. But I learned a lot also for my current role, and what I also must say is all of those terms like agility, Scrum, safe, and whatever. I mean, a lot of people now tend to use them without really understanding what it is. And in one of the early days, I called it, because I was observing like people were behaving, and some were focusing on some kind of, we need to follow the process and trying to dictate who needs to do what and these kind of things. I was having this example in mind that agility is somehow a Yeti. Yeah, some folks claim to have seen it, and the other folks don't believe it, or something like this. Yeah, so I think that the most important point, and that's what I took out of the experience, is the most important factor of agility is the right mindset, the right people. If you have one or two folks in the room and involved in the process that are not sharing the same mindset, they can kill the whole process. And the other observation is, and that's, I guess, also in most of the companies present, there are a lot of people talking about agility and claiming to do safe and Scrum, but they are obviously not doing that. So it's just a promotional aspect. Oh, we are now living Scrum, but if you look in the details, it's obviously not the case.
Yeah, I see often more agility is rather chaos in many of the environment I've been seeing, which is actually not the way it is. So why we also try to help with our framework, how it could be really conducted well to ensure everything is embarked and the product value is generated, and not just hype and nice marketing.
Yeah, what I didn't tell is what we had also an agile coach, and she was strongly working on mindset and not so much on the process. So really thinking about how can I offer to help, and how do I talk to people, and this interaction. I think that's the most important piece in getting it done, and that's also what I learned from the project.
Okay. Good. Then now we are just on time. Thanks really a lot, everyone, for participating. Thanks, Frank, for the really good presentation. We will share the slides to the participants, and we will also put the video recording on our YouTube channel. So you will get a link, I think, to it, right, Christian? So, and thanks a lot, and wish you all a wonderful day with a lot of brain food that Frank nicely provided. So have a nice day, everyone, and talk to all of you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.